What's up guys, welcome to my channel. So today we're going to be talking about the foundation of blues and the lost art of blues guitar in metal lead guitar playing. So whether it's Dimebag Darrell, Eddie Van Halen, even Yngwie Malmsteen could shred the blues, Kirk Hammett, Dave Mustaine, and any of the guys that he's played with like Marty Friedman, all of these top level metal guitar players had a foundation and an underpinning in blues guitar. So let's get that into your playing today. Okay guys, so let's jump straight into learning some tasty blues stuff so we can spice up your metal guitar playing and get you slaying like Dimebag Darrell, one of my favorite metal lead guitarists. So there's a couple of things we really need to be wrapped around if we want to be sure our metal lead playing incorporates the blues well. I'm going to cover the pentatonic scale, the blues scale, the blues and pentatonic scale extensions, double stops, chromatic blues passages, classic blues licks, bending, little bit of vibrato, and then finish off with some legato. So I'm going to jump through each of these concepts, give you a couple of examples of them being used in lead guitar playing and exercises for you to work through so that you can get your lead guitar crying and screaming with the soul of a blues king. So the first thing that we need to start with is we need to choose a key. For our scales. So what I've chosen to work through in this lesson is the key of C sharp minor. It's an unusual key, but it's the key that Dimebag played a couple of his solos in, particularly and most notably Floods, which I think is one of the best examples of like bluesy metal guitar lead. So we're going to use that key today for pretty much everything that we're going through. So the first thing that we need to start off with is we need to understand that now if we want to keep moving through the blues, we then need to add an extra note, which is a flat fifth, to our pentatonic. So this gives us the blues scale. So in C sharp minor, we get this. Descending. And we get this. Now there's a lot of character adding that extra note in. We start to really just get that bluesy sound. And if we play that over a backing track, we're already halfway there. So the next thing that we need to explore are what I like to call pentatonic and blues extensions. So occasionally, blues guys will venture to the neighbor of this box on the low strings, on the downward side, and on the high strings on the upward side of it. So you'll occasionally see them slip into some scale runs that look like this. You see how I'm taking use of a little box up the top here, an extension, and the same thing down below that are neighboring and adjacent to the pentatonic. So again, I get that. Now we can add some blues notes to that and start to get something really cool here. So if I play the extension with the blues scale now, I get this. Sounding pretty cool, right? Awesome. So already I have a lot of different things that I can use that are going to sound absolutely amazing over a backing track. So let's try some of these concepts out and just see how they sound over a backing track in C sharp minor. So I've written something here in Guitar Pro. Let's chuck it on and let's have a go. Pentatonic. Let's try some blues. Some extensions. Excellent. You can see how this starts to sound and how I've got a lot of tools that I can play with. Obviously, at times I'm using some techniques there like sliding and bending, and I'm going to assume that you know how to bend, especially for this next section, and I'll talk about it here when we discuss the classic blues licks. But you can see how I've used those tools there to really start to open up my playing. Just get out of that boring pentatonic box shape and understand what I'm doing and throw some extra spice on it. All right, so now let's talk about some classic blues licks. So when you study lead guitar, there are some lines that you are going to see in almost every solo. And every great lead guitarist tends to sort of carry a baton from the previous generation forward. And you see a lot of stuff sort of seeping through every 10 years into the next generation from the one before. Who I consider the forefather of kind of a lot of the metal and rock blues lead guitar would be Angus Young. And then a lot of the guys in the 80s kind of replicated what he was doing, but the metal and the thrash stuff sort of incorporated a lot of faster legato work on top of those bluesy licks and sometimes some arpeggio based stuff as well. But then we have Slash, and Slash I feel really did a great job of carrying the blues forward. And when you study his playing, you can really see Angus Young was a massive influence on him. Now, we also had guys like Eddie Van Halen in this period, and we have to have a big nod to him. Obviously, he's famous for tapping, but what a fantastic blues player as well. And then, you know, he kind of carried the baton forward to Dimebag Darrell, who, in my opinion, is the greatest metal guitar player of all time, and really was a blues guy in a kind of metal shell, if you like, or a blues guy playing metal guitar, and it was just absolutely amazing what he pulled off. Other notable guys, Zakk Wylde as well, did an amazing job at kind of incorporating the blues and the pentatonic work, and then I think Alexi Laiho in the early 2000s did a fantastic job of kind of giving us really sassy, attitude-driven soul mixed in with shred in a kind of death and power metal setting. So if you don't know any of those players, make sure you go and check out some of their solos and their lead work, because it's absolutely incredible what they did. But for all of these players, we're going to see some of these licks creep in. So I'm going to now run through some classic blues licks. So my first example looks like this. This is one you see everywhere. It's scattered in solos like nothing else matters, a lot of Metallica stuff, but you're always going to come across this one. It can be just a little snippet or it can be repeated like that. That's something that blues guys will do. Blues is about feeling and about playing in the moment. And a lot of blues guys are really good at improvising, and they'll never quite play the solo the same way twice. They just go with what they're feeling in the moment. They use the tools that we've discussed, but then they'll walk outside of what they've done a little bit and just go with what they're feeling on that night when they're up on stage. So this is classic blues example number 1. So we have to start with a bend at the 11th fret. We want to make sure that's a big, healthy, full tone bend. And then we want to use the second and the third finger here to push that string up, whilst having our first finger flat across the 9th fret on the B and the E string. So I like to start this lick with an upstroke. So some of the picking with the blues stuff can be a little bit unorthodox, and you've got to sort of find your way. The general rule would be to alternate pick, but there is a bit of economy picking that comes in at times. Other important sort of little details with this lick is that because I start on an upstroke with this right hand, I can then actually mute that bend with my thumb here when I go to pick the next note, because the next note is a downstroke. So naturally, my thumb comes down to mute that note as I'm picking the B string. This is important because a lot of the times people don't know how to exit out of that bend, or they kind of carry it through and get a really messy sound like this, where the notes are bleeding through each other. So just be mindful of that. Try and practice that as a technique. It's a little tricky to get down, but obviously with guitar, it's about slowing things down, digging into the detail and having patience, and then building it into your muscle memory. So then the last thing too is making sure that you have a slight roll on this first finger here between these 9th frets on the B and the E string, so that you don't get the ring between the two. We want Now, Of course, as you get faster, there's going to be more temptation to bleed, but you want to try and build that out of your playing slowly. Okay, so let's move on to our second lick here. You see this back in stuff in Iron Maiden, Metallica, like all of the thrash stuff in the 80s, but the late 70s as well. So we're going to start with the same concept, and I actually hold the same position with this hand as I do for that first lick, but I'm not going to jump up to the E string this time. I'm going to stay on the B string and do a pull off from 12 to 9. So I get a really cool line there, and this is one of those ones that usually a lot of lead guitarists will just hang on this lick, repeat it, and change the phrasing up a little bit. But it's a great one for you to wrap your fingers around and just have in your arsenal for your blues expression time or when you're jamming and improvising. Now, similarly, we can take that same lick, but we just move the second note up to the E string and then have everything else the same. If we do that, I get this cool lick. You've definitely heard that one before, and you're going to see it a million times. So again, my picking starts with an upstroke, downstroke on that second one to give me a bit more flow. So just be mindful of the picking and make sure that you practice these really slowly and build them up in speed over time. Now, example number 4 would be taking this lick and moving it down to the B and the E string. So a little trickier here because I like to bend with my third finger. And you've got options here of whether you use the pinky for the pull-off or your third finger. I find this one a little awkward personally. It's just one of those licks. Everyone's got their little quirks and their little licks that they don't necessarily sort of gravitate to because they don't feel the most comfortable. This is one of those ones for me. But this is another one that you will see regularly, and it's worth practicing and sort of getting your muscle memory down. Okay, exercise number 5 would be a bit of a combo of a couple of the ones that we saw earlier. So we're gonna go. So a little tricky because I have to use my third finger for that bend on the B string to get across there, and there's a little bit of a stretch on my left hand to get that, and it's difficult to get this one clean, but it's a great lick, and obviously guys like Slash and Dimebag and pretty much everyone in the blues scene will use this one. So that's another great one. I've thrown in one for fun here, which is actually an Angus Young lick that is from the Back in Black solo that I just think is so cool because it gets you working on your rolling. And it's just a great sort of finisher lick here. A nice one there, okay? So you can study that one too. Just be mindful of the right hand on that one because it's a little tricky sort of transitioning over the strings like that. And then when we're going from the 9th fret on the B and the G string, the temptation is to not roll, and you want to try and roll so that we don't get a double stop or bleed across the notes like that. Making it sing, making it cry, making it scream. All right, so let's have a quick sort of look into what double stops are. So I'm not going to deep dive on this too much because I don't use it that often, and I find there's only a couple of instances where this is used in sort of metal-based playing. But a double stop is essentially where we make a chord out of the same 2 frets across strings. So I find the most common on the G and the B string. So if I play here 9 and 9, you can see how I'm experimenting a bit there with these double stops. Sometimes they're not the best sounding thing to me personally, but this is what it's about. It's about finding what you like as a player. But obviously a lot of these guys will use that, and you're going to see double stops in some of these solos, so I wanted to mention them here. All right, the next thing we need to be wrapped around are some bend licks that sort of use multiple strings because these can be a bit difficult. So obviously we want to be pretty comfortable with our bending, and I go through this in a little bit of detail in my video on vibrato. I run through basically the mechanics of bending. So if you want to jump into that video and really work on upgrading your bends and your vibrato, make sure you check that video out. I'll link it here so you can. and you can add it to the playlist of some of my lesson material to go through. But the first lick we want to get comfortable with is this one. So we want to bend the 12th fret on the B string, but we want to have our first finger sitting on the 9th fret of the top string without moving it up, without bending it. We're just bending the B string here. So with all of these licks I'm about to show you, what guys do is they'll often play them together or they'll break them up. Like this, okay? So it's important that you practice them in a way that you can then make choices on the right hand, whether you're gonna play them together or whether you're gonna break them up. The next lick, you wanna take that same 12 on the B string, but now hook your pinky on the 12 on the high E. We get this one. This is classic Angus Young, classic slash. It's a little trickier because we've got to keep our pinky stationary and not move that E string up. First one, second one. Now we're going to move into what I call the classic country bend. We're just going to move now to the B and the G string. This is actually the start of the Flood solo. Right there, classic blues lick right there. Okay, so now running through legato. The first thing that we want to do is play our scales with legato. So legato is if we're ascending, we hammer on. If we're descending, we're pulling off. So, pentatonic. A lot of the 80s thrash guys did this stuff really quickly. Kirk Hammett is actually insanely fast with his like pentatonic legato. We also want to practice this with the blues scale. That in itself is going to start to strengthen up this left hand and give you a little bit of a workout, okay? Then I've incorporated a couple of legato exercises here. So a classic one, this is taken from the Walk solo, is... And then another one here where I'm actually moving up into the pentatonic extension. Great little line that you can repeat and sort of hash out, but it's also a fantastic workout for this left hand. So take that one nice and slow. Awesome. All right, so now we should be feeling pretty bluesy after all this. So I've got one last little bonus for you guys, which is a Dimebag style chromatic run here. So Dime would often throw in a couple of extra notes. So you've seen with the blues, we're adding this extra note that gives us a chromatic on 2 strings. So Dime would actually throw in a couple of extra notes with legato, and then you get something like this, which is in the 10 solo. So a little different from exactly what he plays, but it's the same sort of idea. Get a nice little blues line there. All right, guys, so that should give you heaps of ammo and stuff to work on. And I also have a free 7-day metal guitar bootcamp that you guys can check out if you want to deep dive, get some downloads and some tabs, and go through a comprehensive program with me that's going to upgrade your metal chops. But for now, jump into that vibrato video, and I'll see you in the next video.